Right. Hello, Kate from the Full Freezer. How are you?
Hello, I'm very good, Hayley. Thank you so much for having me.
Nice one. Yeah, so obviously we set up Freezer 11 weeks ago, and you guys got in touch with us because you had some amazing tips about freezers and how useful they can be. And to be honest with you, I had no idea. So I just shove whatever in the freezer. There's usually a couple of ice cubes at the bottom. There's usually, just random stuff like some fish fingers and some bits and pieces. But actually, what you're saying is that we can use it. We can all use it in a much better way. So I love you to tell us all about that.
Absolutely. So, the first thing I should say is you are not alone. So, the vast majority of people that I seem to speak to have the same thing of, the freezer is used for ice and it's used for stuff bought from the shops. And it's usually really, really unorganized. So you have to go like digging through to try and find stuff, and you forget what's in there. There was a recent study done that found that something like 5% of people in Britain have food in their freezer that's over 5 years old. So yeah, it's one of those things that it is so common. But what people don't tend to realize with their freezers is like this is actually prime real estate in your kitchen. It is quite genuinely like the most magical white good that you own, because it can literally freeze time. So you've got something that's going off today, you can freeze it and eat it in 3 months. You don't have to eat it today. And the problem is usually that we're worried about things like food safety, which rightfully so, nobody wants to get sick, but also just like what you can freeze and how to freeze it. And that's essentially where, that's where my business came from. I actually set up the Full Freezer, like the concept of it, when I was on maternity leave with my second child, and I kept on buying food in to try and batch cook, which is what I always used to do. And it just kept on going off because I was like, I don't have 3 hours to stand in the kitchen and cook and prep food. So I have frozen things like if I've opened a tin of pineapple, and I've got half a tin left.
Freeze pineapple.
Yeah, so if you'd opened up a tin and your child's had a bit of pineapple and they don't want the rest of the tin, and you don't want it, you don't want to eat it just for the sake of eating it, you chop it up into little pieces, spread it out on a tray so it's not all stuck together. So I've got special trays for it now, because I got to a point where I was like, I need to invest, because I'm doing this all the time. But I actually started out literally with baking trays. So that is a really battered oven baking tray.
Everyone's
and another
one.
Yeah, and I would get cooking liners, so you can get those from like the pound shop and B&M and those sorts of places. A quid for a cooking liner. So they're basically like reusable parchment paper. All you do is give them a wash, dry them off, chop the tops off, chop them up to whatever size you want, spread them out on the tray and pop them in your freezer, leave them for an hour or two, and then you can bag them up. And then my daughter actually likes to just eat strawberries still frozen. You do have to be careful with frozen fruit, because obviously there's potential choking risk there, particularly with small children. Like I actually really like frozen grapes, but I would never give frozen grapes to a child unless it was cut up.
Fair enough.
But the way that you can otherwise use them, if you don't want to eat them frozen, make smoothies. You could make purees to go on ice cream or something. You could put them in pancakes. You could use them in baking. So, like your tinned pineapple, you don't want to eat it now, but you want to chop it up, freeze it, and then whenever you've got time on some weekend, you could, I don't know, make a pineapple upside down cake or something. If you have that sort of time, yes. Most of the time.
I don't ever think that though. So with the tinned pineapple, my husband loves pineapple, so I do cook with it quite a lot, but I don't generally use a whole tin of it. So I'll take out 2 rings or whatever, and then put it back in the fridge with all the best intentions of eating it. And then lo and behold, a week later, it's growing mold on. So I don't ever question, can I freeze it? And I suppose maybe what I'm learning from you is to go, Well, can I to ask yourself the question? And I have got a feeling that my mum's going to watch this and be a little bit disappointed in me, because I would never have thought about freezing fruit.
No,
Because I would just buy a bag of frozen fruit and use
Yeah.
that if I was going to make a smoothie. But the amount of fruit that gets wasted, and I hate the food waste. I just try and gobble it up or feed it to the kids or make my husband eat it. But there is still a really big amount of stuff that gets wasted in the fridge, and it is soul destroying.
The week, and yes, you can.
Sandwiches, no, stop it.
Yes.
Stop it.
Yes.
So how would you do
this
that?
Morning, literally, so you can't put salad in them because they'll go soggy. You need to use, the bread needs to be as fresh as possible, so ideally bought that day. And generally butter is better than mayo because it forms a little bit of a barrier between the filling and the bread. And then it's pretty much fair play from there.
So if I question, let's say I'm cooking something tonight, and I don't know, what do I plan to cook tonight, actually? That's a very valid point. But if I think, okay, well, can I freeze this? So you're saying go to @can I freeze it on Instagram?
Yeah. So Instagram.com, /can I freeze it?
Pretty much, you'll have let me know. Is there a way of me asking you? Can I write in the comments? Can I freeze this pomegranate or something?
Yeah, I've not done the video for pomegranate, but I did actually.
Pomegranate's that's amazing. Oh wow, Kate.
Like I used to love batch cooking, and I think there's a massive place for batch cooking, and it can be a huge benefit, but it gets really, really boring. Like if you end up with all the same meals over and over and over again, it's like you don't want to eat that food. Whereas I think it's really valuable once people know that they can freeze individual items of food. So you can have onion frozen, you can have peppers frozen, you could you cook your roast chicken on a Sunday. And like we always used to be like, okay, well, we'll eat chicken for the next 2 days until it's all gone. Now we'll have our roast chicken, and then I'll strip the bird and then open freeze all the pieces. And then they go into a bag, and that can be used on pizzas, that could be chucked into pasta, it can be chucked into risotto. And literally, because it's already cooked, it just goes in frozen. And as long as you cook it through thoroughly, then that's perfectly safe to do.
Okay, so I've got a little quiz for you then. I'm going to ask you what I can freeze. Okay, I'm going to try and think of it as obscure as possible. So I was thinking as we were talking, can I freeze ham?
Yes.
Okay, you've said that we can freeze milk.
Yes.
Can we freeze soya milk?
Yes, but it does tend to change the consistency and the flavour a bit. So it might be that it's best used in cooking after.
Can I freeze cheese?
Yes.
Any type of cheese?
Hard cheeses freeze better. And better if you grate them. So like cheddar, if you grate, and I use a food processor to grate it. If you've got a food processor with one of those, you get those weird discs with them, and you're like,
old, like 90s food processor with, my mum had one.
Yeah,
okay.
What is that for? If one of the discs will be a grating disc, and you can literally grate it in like 5 seconds. It's great.
Who knew? Okay. What about herbs? What about like my garden herbs? I grow mint and fennel and all that outside in the garden. What about them? Can I freeze them? What, just like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 3 things you can do.
I'm so stupid right now.
You can either just but this is the thing that made me want to start the full freezer, because I was like, actually, I think unless you have an allotment, no one would ever think particularly to freeze kind of the surplus stuff. So yeah, your herbs, you can either just freeze them as they are. So just, take the leaves off, spread them out on a tray and bag them up. You might find they get a bit crushed and stuff, but the flavour should still be fine. You can also put them into ice cube trays with some oil, and then they can be chucked in when you're cooking. And so you've got kind of flavoured oil. And then my favourite one, is mix them with some butter. So get a bit of proper butter, mix like your rosemary or some even garlic and stuff, mix it in, and then get I've actually got some parchment paper here as well. How organised am I? Get
I
some
love
parchment and make like almost like a little Christmas cracker. So like get it into a cylinder and twist the ends and then freeze it like that. And then when you want to use it, you can just slice off a bit of your herby butter, and you could use it with roasted vegetables or steak or fish or whatever you're having.
I feel like quite excited about using the freezer, which is ridiculous. I never thought I'd hear myself say that. I mean, it's just been great to talk to you. It's so informative. And I know that I'm certainly going to make some huge changes now. So thank you so much for talking to us. And we will see you soon. All right. You take care, Kate.
Thanks very much, Hayley. Thanks for having me.